Hello, my beautiful friend. Welcome back to my channel. So today we're talking about if you have been trying to change something in your life, whether it's your income, your health, your relationships, your confidence, and it just feels like no matter what you do, you essentially snap back into those similar patterns, those default responses and reactions. They're not even responses, they're just like actual reactions. And if this is you, there's a really good chance that the reason for them is not necessarily what you think it is, right? Because it's not necessarily a lack of willpower or discipline. It's not necessarily a mindset problem. It's your self-concept, your identity, your personality. Because as Dr. Joe Dispenza says, if you want to change your reality, right, any of those things in your reality, you've got to change your personality. And the trick with our personalities is that we're like not taught like how to know who we are and what is important to us and what we believe and like what all these roles and identities that we are playing and how they are ultimately affecting our lives. It's like we go to school and we learn all these other things, but the most important thing to learn about is essentially yourself and the self concept, right? This like these internal characters that you play, aka like your personality is really what I call it, are roles that you've been essentially playing your whole life, right? Since you were a child. And it's really important that you understand that as a child, you were not given any choice about how you responded and reacted, right? You were building survival mechanisms to get your needs met unconsciously, largely unconsciously, right? It was just like, I'm hungry. I need to get my need of hunger met. I need warmth. I need someone to come keep me warm. I need milk. Right? Like I need. So they were all needs that you needed to get met. And depending on how those needs were met, like how quickly, the quality, the right? Like if your mom, for example, was like rushing around and like so busy, with like, what's it called, balancing a few jobs, and she was just like, oh my gosh, like, I'm so stressed, and I've quickly got to feed the baby, and like didn't have any support or didn't have any other help. Maybe she like rallied and brought in your siblings or whatever. So she was potentially present, like physically present, but the quality of the care and the response that she gave you to get your need met may not have felt like what you were really expecting and hoping for, etc. So it's important to just recognize that the way that we are as adults, right, is typically like the self-concept of the self that we think we are and that we often are so oversubscribed and identified with, which is why this is like very much around identity shifting. The self-concept that you have, your personality, which is all sort of the same thing. These characters or these roles, right? So sometimes you might not even realize that you're playing multiple roles and that you have multiple characters, but just the way I like to explain it is that we have multiple identities across different contexts of our lives. So even in this video right now, you might be operating in and out of like 3 or 4 different identities. You might be a parent, you might be managing the kids in the background, you might be an entrepreneur, you might be a leader in a company, you might, be a manager, whatever. So now like we've got either like entrepreneur as an identity or, employee or business owner, whatever. So that's a different identity. Then maybe, I was mentioning siblings, like maybe you have siblings or maybe you were an only child or maybe you were adopted. So those are also a different identity. Then maybe like, you have a partner. So, whether you're married or not, doesn't matter. Like, so you have a partner, you're in a relationship. So that's a different identity because the way you parent is oftentimes very different to how you relate to others, right? So even in one little tiny brief conversation, right, that we are having right now, you are stepping in and out of multiple characters, multiple identities in multiple contexts of your life. And that's why in the Aligned Living Collective, right, my free community, which you're more than welcome to go and check out and join, I teach a lot about what I call the leverage points of change and how identity is one of the highest leverage points of change. It's not the highest, right? There is your soul state is above that and source of inspiration and energy is even above that. But what most people don't realize is that when you're trying to change the external reality that you find yourself in, whether it's again like your health or your wealth or your relationships or whatever, right? And you are trying to do it at the behavior level because all of the self-help gurus and books and podcasts and like every fucking video that you have out there is like, this is the new habit that you need. And this is the new morning routine. This is the new nighttime routine. Routines are about behaviors, and the level of behavior is one of the lowest leverage points of change. It's actually the second lowest. Your current reality and environment is the lowest because there's no leverage, right? Like it is old energy, right? That's why I teach energy intelligence, and I teach people how to access the energetics behind everything that they do. Your thoughts and your feelings and your words and your actions, and your identities and your values and your beliefs, etc., and like your ancestral patterns, like they all have an energetic root because ultimately everything is just energy. So when you can start to recognize and stop yourself from like playing the role of the character that you've always played your whole life, and you can stop and really start to like look at yourself as a concept, right? So that's like the main like piece of this that's so helpful, is that who you think you are, self, is actually just a construct. It's just a concept that you have bought into. Because when you were born, right, like you were given your name, you were told where, like, like how to behave and what's right and what's wrong and what's good and what's bad and what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. You didn't have a choice when you were growing up. And then as you did develop and grow up and like, now you were a little bit more independent to now go out and get your own needs met and get love and attention and acknowledgement from your loved ones and your caregivers, right? Now there were certain unspoken sort of rules about what your family system felt was appropriate or inappropriate. And so as a child, right, like you are going to do whatever you need to do to get in line and so that you can receive love and safety, because it's basically a survival need, that you are ultimately trying to get to maintain. And so if you act out of accordance, right, of your family system or what was expected of you or what was right or wrong or good or bad or whatever, however, people were behaving and expected you to behave, then there was potentially consequences, right? And so that self that you built in those early years now becomes, right, this grown up adult and largely is operating unconsciously and from a self concept that is not necessarily what or who you need to be now moving forward, right? Like you are now an adult and you now have choice and you now can create a completely different reality and environment for yourself. But it's not just going to take different behaviors. It's going to take you being a different person. But the person that you are, the identity that you are, that you have subscribed to and identified with for so many years, right, needs to be dismantled, right? Needs to be reprogrammed, needs to be sort of like owned and acknowledged and appreciated for the role that it played and thanked. And then it's like, okay, cool. Like, who else can I be and what else is possible? And that's where you have to really access your soul state and what I call your soul state, which is, above the identity, which is informing, and really understand like, okay, well, who are you energetically and uniquely designed to be? And, because especially like if you have a tendency of being a people pleaser or have a hard time saying no, or like those are the behaviors that give you the clues, right, as to who you're being. And so when you start to really consider, okay, like, is this working for me? If I want these different results in my life, if I want a different kind of relationship, or if I want a different financial outcome, or if my health is not really, great, what is contributing to that? Like, who am I being? What is it that I believe, right? Because an identity is going to have associated beliefs and values. What's important to that identity? And were those beliefs and values and things and even that identity in and of itself, right? That self-concept, is that something that you would choose now, right? With free will, with total free choice, like you're, a grown adult. And the question really becomes like, is this actually serving you? And is this actually necessary? And then likely what's going to happen as you start to contemplate that question, you're going to potentially feel different emotions, right? Because thoughts and emotions and words and actions, again, are all just energy in motion. And then you've got to become aware, right? That's why it's one of in my 5 A's of alignment in the Aligned Living Collective, right? We start with helping you to really raise your awareness, to awaken your awareness, to become aware of like, who you are, right? Like not just like who you are as like your personality, but like what is your personality made of? What is your self-concept made up of? And is it actually working for you? And we sort of dissect it and look at it very objectively without any judgment, right? With like in a loving, safe space so that it can reveal itself to you, right? Because it's also very linked to the ego and that the ego wants to survive, right? And it has served you up until this point. It has helped you survive up until this point. So just being like, oh, I'm going to like let go of my identity and like, I need to be a new person. I'm going to visualize myself as this. Like, that's why that shit doesn't really work, right? Like visualization and affirmations and like all the things, like they work to a certain degree. And that's also like, if you want to really dive deeper into this, the Aligned Living Collective, my school community, SKOOL community, is really where I teach this like deep dive and you can go through like all the things and really understand like why visualization and setting goals and affirmations and all like the typical self-help strategies that are out there don't actually help you change your personality and your self-concept because you are so attached to it. And so just like saying affirmations and like really trying to like just repeat things over and over again, or like, even a good Abraham Hicks like Rampage, which I love, and I do my own versions in form of energy syncs, which is like a Rampage had a baby with like my version of affirmations, which are like current, statements of truth that make you feel better. And like a little bit of meditation. So it's like all of that combined is really how you sync your energy. That's why it's my proprietary process, energy syncing, because you've got to sync your energy to a new rhythm. It's like recoding, right? Like you can't just, like if you're operating from, a MacBook Air and you now want a MacBook Pro, you can't just be like, my computer is suddenly like, my computer's going to be a MacBook Pro, it's not, it will never be that. So it's like, you can't just, like have one identity, like still operating, like one computer still there and hoping and pretending that it's going to just like all of a sudden become some other different computer. So yes, it's totally possible to like change your self-concept, to change your personality. And this is the process of learning how to access the energetics and to become aware of them and right to start to align your energies and start to actualize a whole new reality, aka environment, which is made up of different behaviors and actions that you will take, but those are also informed by the different capabilities and skills that you either need to learn and acquire, or the willingness, which is linked to the belief, which is linked to the value. So it's like a whole cascade of energy, from like energy in its infinite form all the way through to its physical dimension in this reality that we find ourselves in. So there's nothing wrong with you, technically, right? If you find yourself like not being able to create or aka manifest anything in your three-dimensional reality in your environment with greater ease and speed and consistency than you that you know is possible and that you truly desire. It's just that potentially along the way, right? Like we've got to go access the energetic that's causing the kink in like the hose pipe. Because if your hose pipe is blocked and has like knots in it and has like things stuffed in it or like there's leaks out of it, right? It's not going to flow. The energy's not going to flow. The water's not going to flow all the way through and like be this beautiful, like fountain and stream of water that's just like available, even though the water is available. So energy is always available. It cannot be created or destroyed. And the nature of like everything is energy. So the quicker that you start to learn energy intelligence and access the energetics and understand your personality through that lens and start to look at it objectively rather than like just ascribing to it and identifying with it and like becoming it, right? You've got to actually get space from it in order to look at it and to be like, like, is this okay? Is this working for me now? And where does this come from? And do a little bit of investigation, right? So like my 5 A's of alignment, the first one is awaken awareness. The second one is address the root, the energetic root cause of what is it that, like, what are you now aware of? Like now we've got to address the root cause. So most people think like, okay, like I need more money or like I need a different relationship or I need more harmony in my relationship or my health is like shit at the moment. And then they start to like try and immediately do different behaviors and take different actions. And that's like trying to address it like immediately. But you first have to like awaken your awareness to like, what the fuck's going on? Where did this come from? And get curious about it, right? Don't judge yourself. Don't judge your past. Like you have to. So systemic family constellation, one of like the most powerful transformational vehicles that I use to help people to access the energetics and to access the field, right? Which is it transcends the logic and the rationale and the like intelligence of you and I or any, like it's not like I know the solution to your problem. It's not like, that's not what my work is about. I don't solve problems. I don't help you resolve problems because that's ultimately just when things like revolve around and around and around in a circle, right? And you never evolve to the next quantum, right? Like evolution of awareness and consciousness. And that's really the name of the game. Right. So you've got to start to really build a practice of becoming more self-aware and more conscious of the energies that are informing your life. Or we've got to do a family constellation where we go and access the field and we discover what is actually in the way there, what needs rebalancing, what needs to be resynced. It's not necessarily a very well-known process for whatever reason, but it is extremely profound and effective because what happens is you are not trying to figure it out and to solve it and to resolve it. And you're not relying on someone else to help you do that because all that is like, Abraham Hicks is like, you're just beating on that drum and like trying to like fix it and solve it. And like, oh, how do we, how do we get rid of this? And like, oh, this is really bothering me and I really don't like this. And I wish I could like, this, it's just like fucking like, just either like throw it away and stop, just like stop talking about it or stop like having it in your frame of awareness. Or you've got to go and like really like look at it and being like, okay, like what is this? And just start accepting it for what it is and acknowledge it without judgment, without saying it's right or wrong or good or bad or it's this or it's that, right? And so that the energy can change form, right? That is what transformation is about. So if you're looking for transformation in your life, it's literally about just changing the form of energy of whatever it is. Really think about that. That's why I teach energy intelligence. That's why I teach you how to access the energetics, because it is literally about how to change the form of the energy. And when you go into a family constellation, you literally are accessing the field of energy, the morphogenic field from a quantum physics point of view. Because here's the thing, if you want a different reality, right, like external environment and reality, the only way to experience that is to fundamentally understand how you are currently operating, how the energy is currently informing you, whether you are largely conscious of it or not. You have to become more conscious of it. And the good news is that it doesn't have to take this like long, it's not a long, complicated process to become aware of yourself and your personality and to look at it and to be like, this is interesting. Like, is this actually working for me? Or does it actually cause like a lot of dysregulation in my nervous system? Does it make me like all anxious and like, like all, like, do you find yourself feeling unfulfilled, frustrated, overwhelmed, anxious, fearful, angry? Like all of those emotions, energy and motion are a signal to you that something is not in alignment, right? It's not like massive rocket science. It's just putting all these parts and pieces together in potentially a way that you've never considered before. So the worst thing you could do is just judge yourself and just like keep thinking that you're doing something wrong or that you are wrong, right? Because anything with from the verb to be, I am, I are, like, right, like you are, that's speaking to the identity, your identity level. So if you're like, well, I'm not a morning person, I'm not a big picture thinker person, I'm not a this, anything after the I am, that's an identity. An identity doesn't necessarily, and it's part of your self-concept and informs your personality and how you like are animated and, personified. So if you've never really stopped to think about like, ooh, like, how am I being right now? How am I thinking? How am I feeling? What am I saying to myself? Are the words that I'm saying to myself, are those word tracks even true? Like, if you might not be a morning, you might not think you're a morning person, but that's just because you've always thought that that's the case. If you would like to be a morning person, you're welcome to be a morning person. It's available to you right now. You just have to be aware of whether that's actually going to work for you. So, my beautiful friend, bottom line is that the problem is not with you. The problem is that your internal concept of yourself is so like fixed and you are so identified with it. So it's like whatever you want, if you're wanting healthy relationships, harmonious relationships, but you're still identifying as someone who has to earn that person's worth or love, right? Because again, like that's what you unconsciously grew up with or were taught was like the way it works. Okay, cool. Like that's just what then needs to be updated, recoded. That's what needs addressing. That's what needs conscious awareness. That's what you need to sync, right? You need to tune and tap into your soul state where all possibilities exist, where energy has no charge. It just is what it is. And allow that to filter through and inform your neurology and all your cells and all the little, right, energetic pathways that ultimately materialize and actualize into three-dimensional reality. So, little recap, your self-concept can't change until you become conscious of the parts of you that make it up, right? All of the parts of yourself. And that's why, what I teach is not necessarily manifestation. I talk a lot about manifestation, right? If you want to manifest anything in any area of your life with ease and speed and consistency, what do I usually say after that? If you know me by now, you've got to access the energetics, learn energy intelligence, and become more aware, consciously aware of all of the energetics that are informing you, because you are the source of your reality. You are the source of everything. And so if you don't know yourself, which unfortunately, like not a lot of us have ever, we weren't taught to know ourselves. We were just taught to be ourselves, which is great, right? Like, but if who you're being is the outdated like 1.0 version, and there's already like a fucking, 56.21 version, it's time to upgrade, right? It's time to upgrade the programming and it's time to upgrade the self, which comes from soul state. Soul state is infinite. It's like an infinite energetic being that is coming into differentiation, right? Coming into three-dimensional form through you, through your human. And that's why I love human design, because it helps you to know like what your energetic being, right? How you are designed to thrive as a human being through the lens of working with your energy. And that's why so many people stay stuck in repeating cycles and patterns, and they try and do all the things. They try and say all the affirmations and visualize and, meditate and set goals and write the goals down and set big goals and big hairy goals, smart goals, all the types of goals. And like none of that has ever worked personally for me. But what did work for me and all of my clients over all the years, right, was really understanding themselves and making that measurable. Like I help you measure what matters. I help you measure like how your energy, how you access your brain, right? What your motivational drivers are, what your human design is. I help you decode who you are and become aware of all this stuff. And sometimes we don't even like do any profiles, right? Sometimes it's just about like accessing the field through a family constellation, a systemic family constellation, because you're accessing the quantum field of intelligence, the source of energy that is like informing everything. That has more answers than like you and I or any therapist or other coach or facilitator or consultant or whatever could ever really know. And so sometimes you just have to like let go and tune and tap in and turn on either to your soul state or to the field to really receive like, what the new insight is. Because that's when you have insight, right? You have to go inside, not hindsight, not wait for the universe or like external situations and relationships and experiences to like make you wake up and then like see in hindsight what's actually going on. Because then it's sort of too late. So really cultivating a practice of insight in the moment of becoming aware of yourself is the name of the game here. Because your self-concept is just that. It's just a concept. You're not going to die if you look at it. Your ego thinks it's going to die. It's going to like be obliterated, but it's not possible. Your ego is always going to be there to like, it's always going to hang around in this three-dimensional experience that we have. The point is like, do you have dominion and sovereignty over your ego, or is that running the show? And usually when you're largely unconscious or you're, repeating patterns and you are just doing things over and over again, usually it's your ego running the show. And it's not an ego from like an egotistical, like I am better than thou. It's more just like your personality, your self-concept, who you think you are, who you think you need to be. Not necessarily like ego, like I have a when people say like I have a big ego, it's usually that they have a big self-concept and like so much to dismantle and so much to like, right, like loosen. Because imagine like, carrying around all these frames of, that are like frames of mind about like who you are in your self-concept and all these identities. It's fucking heavy. It's so heavy. And that's not essentially who you are. At your core essence, you are actually just source, right? Experiencing itself individuated. But like, your soul state, like it doesn't require an identity, it doesn't require a religion, it doesn't require right, wrong, good, bad, better, worse, blah, 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 blah. And so just imagine what the world would be like, what our planet would be like, our collective humanity, if we were all operating from our soul state, where there is no judgment, there is no right, wrong, good, bad, my religion, your religion, right? My sex, your sex, no sex, fucking a million, like all the things, right? That cause all of this perception of division and separation and judgment and like mind left and right and like literally like all that divisiveness. Just like, what does it do? It just causes conflict and WARS. I think that word that I often talk about is potentially like causing my videos to be restricted. But anyway, um, okay, my beautiful friend, you know where to find me if you need me. The Aligned Living Collective. So excited. It's my new home. I never thought that I'd be so excited about like a little place on the internet, other than YouTube, of course. I really am enjoying bringing you all this content and like sharing everything in such a lovely, accessible way. But the Aligned Living Collective is like my own little, corner, my little sacred safe space that I get to curate and create. And that's where like the rubber really meets the road if you're wanting to live in alignment and truly like master what I call quantum manifestation and like aligned living, where you get to create anything with ease and speed and consistency. Before I go, my beautiful friend, this is the Aligned Living Collective that I've literally just finished creating for you. It's so funny. When I was little, I always wanted to be a teacher. And now, like, how ironic that I literally have my own school, SKOOL. So for the month of December, it is completely free to, obviously, it's free to join. It always will be free to join. But for the month of December, if you're watching this in December, you will be able to have all access to all of the free, to the premium content, right? So if you go inside, you'll see that there's a monthly coaching call happening in 5 days. And then there's also a family constellation happening on the 28th. And so if you want to try out a constellation and you want to get some coaching and you want to start to dive deeper into how to access energetics and how to, build up your energy intelligence and start to live more aligned and learn all the things, right? Learn all the duplicatable, replicatable frameworks that I talk about, like whole brain thinking and human design and the Enneagram and leverage points of change and all of that, you will have access to all of the different content. And so the Aligned Living curriculum is where you will find my 5 A's of alignment. And there's even a bonus energy upgrade, which is huge. So there's a lot of amazing stuff in here. And I would highly recommend that you jump in and take advantage of it throughout December. And I can't wait to connect with you inside there. Like that is going to be the place for us to connect inside on a deeper level and for you to have access to me. There's going to be like, as I build it out, right? Like I'm building the plane as we're flying. So, but at the moment there's like a shit ton of stuff for you to keep yourself busy. And in 5 days, we could potentially be on a coaching call and you could be getting some hot seat coaching. And yeah, and there's a family constellation at the end of the month, which you don't want to miss. If you have one of those repeating like mystery situations, experiences, relationships, etc., that you just are like, what the actual fuck is going on? We'll access the field and we'll see what's happening. All right, my beautiful friend, I hope I see you in there soon. Bye.